As many of the male teenage movie enthusiasts do, I went through that phase. The Joker, Pulp Fiction, Tarantino, that phase. Honestly, I'm still in that phase, and to be even more honest, it's not really a phase at all. When it came to filmmaking itself and what something could accomplish on its own, I became obsessed with 3 properties above all else. The 2 I mentioned already, plus John Wick.
What's a movie you want to see? There's a lot of features that have been made before you. A whole lot of movies you could watch without you. What's the movie that we have never seen because you haven't made it?
So I made something. I called it Upshot Affairs. A 20-minute short film I spent 2 whole years of my life writing, animating, rendering, editing, sound designing, and other thingings. It started from a screenplay, which was the first one I ever wrote. The film that exists now is a Lego adaptation of the first 20 pages of whatever number draft I was on at the time. And while my tastes have grown and changed since I started, I couldn't be more proud of what we made. This video is to talk about it, call it a director's commentary, if you will, although I'm deliberately avoiding a label to give myself permission to talk about whatever the hell comes to mind. Hint, there's a lot that comes to mind. Firstly, why Lego? Well, I'll get to that later, but let's come back to this.
What's the movie that we have never seen because you haven't made it?
That little piece of writing advice put an idea into my head. A nearly fully formed idea that basically took me over completely back in the COVID remote learning high school days. Instead of paying attention to the poor teacher doing their best to entertain and teach a board of blank initials, I wrote a movie. A movie that didn't exist yet, but I'd kill someone's baby to see. What if a Tarantino movie had a villain like the Joker and action scenes like John Wick? Yeah, don't make fun of me, please. I'm aware of how brutally uninspired that is. You'd never say something like that in a pitch to a Hollywood producer. It's laughable. You'd get laughed at. Although I'm not going to lie to anyone either. That's what it was, and always remained as. Personally, I still think it's pretty cool, and I stand by it. Take a moment and imagine its genius with me, please.
Now, Bright Boy, I will admit you are pretty clever.
I appreciated the long, suspense-filled talking scenes sprinkled throughout Tarantino movies, with their unnerving resistance on cutting the elastic. I adored the widely shot, beautifully choreographed action scenes of John Wick with the visceral physicality that, while extremely stylish, felt like the rawest reflection of physical danger and action that I'd ever seen. For some reason, perhaps from my entire life as an athlete, that connected with me. There shouldn't be anything relatable in a man stabbing another man through the forehead with a pencil, but there is. There is. Then, through something I'm not even going to attempt to describe in Heath Ledger, I was fascinated.
You'll find him and make him squeal.
A charisma you should be attracted to, placed into a character beyond your definition of evil.
Some men just want to watch the world burn.
I wanted to see a movie that stole your attention like this.
This is a tasty burger.
And instead of releasing it in a big bang, have it linger even longer, but now transformed from a verbal confrontation into a physical one. In my head, I saw a formula, and I just wanted to put it to screen and see it for myself. I had no audience member in mind. I didn't really care if anyone else felt as equally interested in a movie scene like that as I did. I was just determined to make it for me. I'm proud of myself for that, and at the time it wasn't intentional. It was just the feelings of a naive boy. Yet the boy was onto something. It's remained a writing thing I will forever keep a hold of. The hell with everyone else's tastes. I'm making it for me. Dialogue writing then became an obsession. I proceeded to study it as if I was being graded for it. I loved hearing people speak to each other in movies and would, in real life too, some psychotic behavior activity. It's something about the words, a back and forth, like lyrical thing. To me, dialogue shared something with music, both in the rhythm of the sound, but also in the way it made me feel while listening. I prided myself on writing cool-sounding back-and-forth exchanges between the two characters, Ricky and Bobby, as I wrote this feature film. In hindsight, though, what I was really doing was just mimicking Jules and Vincent, but hey, as Stephen King says, imitation comes before creation. I became aware of how heavily imitative this project was around halfway through the process of making it. This is horrible. That's what I thought. In thinking something like that, one might actually make extreme changes to try and pull the project out of that definition, likely in fear of being labeled as unoriginal. To some, being labeled as unoriginal might be worse than never creating the thing in the first place. And so after some time to think about that, I chose to simply accept it. I wasn't going to pretend it was anything besides what it was. I committed to it. The comments below the video are precisely what I was both most afraid of and most expecting. But hey, you seem to like it that way, and you know what? Me too. As I continue to write and revise new drafts of Upshot Affairs, of course, I intend to make it more of my own. I intend to make it more personal to me, moving it away from imitation. Although I want that spirit of inspiration to stay. So instead of simply moving away from those, Tarantino, Joker, John Wick tropes, I plan to embrace them and then twist them into my own tastes. I believe there is where you find the story you're telling. The remaining undeveloped pages of Upshot Affairs follow the stories of two men in pursuit of their dream. That little fire inside that took a hold of them long ago, scratching, itching at them to move towards the flame. Maybe they don't know quite yet why they're attracted to it, but something in their gut does. It's about them versus the forces that aim to deter them away from that passionate pursuit. When it comes to writing a story, those thematic motivations are always important, but there's no right way to find them. Some writers like to start with one and then build a story around it, like a word, like revenge, and then they build a revenge story around it. Maybe you want to build your story purposely around the dangers in seeking revenge, or the joys in seeking love, or the beauty in friendship, or maybe you just thought of an idea that sounds like it would make a cool movie. I fell into the latter one. From there, it's less so about writing your story, but listening to it. My biggest regret with the whole project is in its lack of conclusion, and as a result, lack of true story. Like, all stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. What exists inside the 20-minute film that you all saw is only the beginning of a story, because it's the first 20 pages. In screenplay terms, that's the first act. I saw no problem with this initially because I was getting to see my ideas come to life. I was forgetting that it would only be me and those who read the script that would be able to contextualize what was really happening in it. Seeing it as a standalone piece is, in a way, meaningless. It took me screening the film to my family to finally realize. Once it ended and once they were beyond confused of what they just saw, you can't figure out the connection between the two guys? Of course they couldn't. I felt pretty dumb after that, and I had no idea what to do. If I released it in its current condition, surely everyone on YouTube would feel just as feelingless as they did. In the original cut, there were no chapters, or as I labeled them, issues, meant to hint at its superhero story inspiration and framework for Bill's character. It was just the opening scene, followed by the plumber's story, the end. The plumber's story actually works solidly as a standalone short, but in conjunction with that opening, makes you try and force a connection that doesn't exist yet. In the format of a feature, if this was 2 hours long, that opening was meant to serve as a cold open, the typical seemingly random first scene to a movie that inevitably comes back around later on in the runtime, which it does, just not within these first 20 minutes. Essentially, the film was broken and needed fixing. But here's the thing, you guys. I was pretty tired of animating and had no intentions of doing any reshoots, as you might say. Momentarily, I toyed with the idea of adding a final scene to hint at the connection between the two plots, where Ricky and Bobby, the two hitmen, get hired to murder this vigilante running around town. What happens is Ricky and Bobby return in their sketchy white van to their hitman headquarters, a plumbing service and supplies shop. Just think of your most generic small business outlet and you're likely spot on. Inside, they walk into the back office to chat with Mr. Harold himself. Harold flames them for being idiots and shooting up the wrong house, but then forgets about that unrealistically quickly and hands them their newest assignment. The Mop is a new vigilante in town, busting up the criminal operations around the city. For the better interests of the mob, it would be best if he died. Ended there, to be continued, whatever. That would have worked, and I surely would have spiced up that dialogue exchange to make it nice and Tarantino-like. But as a believer in ending scenes being the most important scene of a film, that idea just didn't sit right with me. I liked ending it with the girl walking into the house, just in time to see her dead parents' blood splattered everywhere. Something about that ending I felt was hauntingly beautiful. In the interest of preserving that, alongside my sanity, in order to avoid extending the project for another 4 or 5 months, I decided to stop trying to connect the two stories, to simply let them be two stories. I gave them labels, I called it there, hoping that they would then just exist as anthologies within one film. A viewer could watch them both and choose to think of how they might be related, while another viewer could just as easily choose to think nothing more of it. Both would be equally valid interpretations. I'm going to presume the majority of my audience came from an interest in Lego or Lego animation rather than an interest in film or short films. For me, since the start of this project, Lego was never really how I saw it in my head. In my head, this was always a story to be told in live action. When I said before I wanted to make the movie that I wanted to see, that's how I'd want to see it. Only issue with this is I'm just a few $1 million shy away from the budget requirements. The only reason I stuck with it to this day, Lego that is, was because of how convenient it is to use.
A man has fallen into the river in Lego City.
I don't need to model anything, I don't need to make any shaders, and I don't need to do any wild special rigging. It's a framework that already exists that I could just use. Thanks to Mecha Bricks and the Blender Bricks community, it's actually come quite easy to just make a short film entirely on your own. For someone with 0 friends, that's quite convenient. My pursuit in Lego back in 2014 was born initially from Lego itself. I just liked it a lot. When I was younger, that was my thing. Lego was what I played with. Before I even knew I wanted to write or make films, or even knew it was a career at all, I was making stop-motion animations in my bedroom.
So, how's your partner? Damn, these donuts are delicious. Looks like they're all mine.
Skip ahead 10 years, I got a little tired of how goddamn finicky and slow the process was, and I realized it wasn't the act of animating that drew me in the most. It was storytelling. I wanted to tell stories, not really play with lamps and rotate plastic arms a few degrees between the shutter of a DSLR. I realized I needed to find a way to speed up that process. I was thinking of stories faster than I could actually tell them. Enter Blender, the most terrifying program you'll ever open for the first time. That was back in the 2.79 days, though. It's a bit better now, I swear. I committed, and I taught myself how to use it. I figured if I could figure it out, my creative freedom in telling a story, in making a film, would skyrocket. Turns out I was right, except I was wrong about the speed thing. Still took me 2 whole last years to make a 20-minute piece. That's literally 2.58% of the average American person's lifespan to create something people click away from after 4 minutes and never think about it ever again. So maybe not faster, but more liberating is what it became. You could just do more inside a CG world than you could do otherwise. Never would we have ever been able to make such an elaborate fight sequence if it hadn't been for Blender and the tools inside. Of course, there are still limitations. I'm only Blender literate to the extent I needed to be, but I found a method which shared significantly more similarities with the methods of live-action filmmaking. After some tests, Blender was here to stay. I was, and never am, going back. That's the whole story, really. From there, I learned what I needed to learn inside Blender to tell the story, and then I outsourced anything that was beyond my capabilities or willingness to learn. In this case, that was anything from some rigging troubles to some lighting to developing a whole bloody gore system that is the glue that holds the film together.
That guy says what?
What else could we talk about? We almost did something insane for music, but unfortunately, being college-aged and time simply didn't work out for the YouTube release. Don't be sad, though. We're hoping to look into submitting the movie to some festivals in the fall, which would give us a much more time to tackle this grand idea. The festival thing is a whole other situation, too, considering we have to consider the copyright laws of Lego. It's something that's strangely difficult to find an answer for online, so I might need to ask some actually intelligent people on that one. Anyways, though, Jambo, the composer who did the epic work on 313th, my last animated film, was going to help out again. Jambo goes to school studying music and is basically a musical genius. For all of those excited about seeing the rest of the story, you're going to have to hurry up and wait. As of now, I have no plans on adapting the rest of the script into any kind of animated format. One day, though, when I'm a little older and with a little more connections, Upshot Affairs will become a reality in the form of a movie in theaters. In the meantime, stick with me here and we'll talk about movies and make some smaller stuff.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.